Do you feel like cardio workouts are stressful for your joints? Maybe running bugs your knees or swimming is bothersome for your shoulders. So a lot of people, when this happens, they choose just to not do cardio at all. But that's not necessarily the best alternative because there are so many health benefits that can come from doing cardio. So the question becomes, well, how then can you do cardio without it bugging your joints? And that's exactly what we want to talk with you about on this week's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast. We're going to cue our introduction and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We're your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we are discussing this idea of cardio and specifically how to make it less stressful for your joints, because so many people understand that there are benefits to doing cardio. In fact, there are immense health benefits that can come from doing cardio consistently. But by the same token, doing cardio repeatedly can feel really stressful for your joints, whether it's something like it's bugging your knees or plantar fasciitis with your feet. Maybe just the pounding feels not that great for your back, or you're doing something like rowing or swimming and starting to bug your shoulders. So the question is, how can you take these cardio activities and the ones that you like, or just doing cardio in general, and make it so it's less stressful for your joints? That's exactly what we want to talk with you about today.
Yeah, Charlie, you're right. So many people do cardio, and I'm glad they're doing cardio because it is so potent for your health. And the thing with cardio, just like resistance training, is if you want more health benefits from your cardio, you have to make it more intense. And so a lot of podcasts, we talk about how do you make exercise, specifically resistance training, safe for your body, even if you are going to make it more intense, because we know the more intensity, the more health changes you're going to get, because we know that it's related to how much muscles are contracting. So we have to make it intense, but then how do we make it safe and repeatable? The same thing goes with cardio, is that we know that if you do cardio in a more intense fashion, challenging your body, obviously in a strategic way, we're going to get more health benefits. But then the question is, well, how do you avoid like the negative side effects of like, I overdid it, or now I'm injuring myself, I have plantar fasciitis, I have achy knees. And usually the solution is don't do that activity. Like the amount of people that come in and say, well, I don't run because like, isn't it bad for your knees? Like it's like common knowledge that like running is bad for your knees. It's not bad for your knees, but there's ways that you can manipulate your cardio so that it's not overtaxing on your joints. But this stuff is just not commonly talked about because it's just a little bit more intricate, but I know you guys are going to get this. And when you apply it, you'll know how to approach your cardio to say, hey, I'm going to do this thing called cardio, and it's going to help me improve my health, and it's not going to degrade other parts of my health, like my joints or my muscle system.
Exactly. And so usually we find that people end up falling into one of two camps when the cardio activities that they're doing starts to bug their joints. Either they say, well, I guess this just isn't for me, I'm just not going to do it, and so they stop altogether. Or they say, well, this is something that I either know I need to do or want to do, like I get enjoyment out of it, so I'm just going to keep pushing through, much to the degradation of their joints and the compromising their system. Neither of those are great solutions. So we want to offer a third potential solution for you today, and we have three ways that you can actually make your cardio less stressful. So if you're sitting there thinking, okay, yeah, it's been a decade since I've gone for a run because of how my knees have felt. If even going for walks is starting to feel like after a mile or two, like my back's starting to tighten up. I don't really like biking, because it feels weird for my hips or whatever. What you are feeling is not uncommon. So many people experience it, but there are ways that you can get your aerobic exercise in, that you can get your cardio in without your body feeling that way. And again, we have three ways that we want to teach you to do that with this podcast today. The first way that we want to talk about is to minimize the skill level that's required to do the activity. Okay, a lot of times when things are higher skill, we end up focusing more on doing the skill versus on controlling our body and making sure that, everything is feeling good for our body. All right. Some examples of higher skill cardio activities are things like doing kettlebells, are things like doing, cardio kickboxing, things like, using the ropes, the battling ropes or whatever. All right. So, and even jump roping. Okay. There's a skill level that is for most people is a little bit more advanced than how they just wake up in the morning. Meaning you got to kind of learn how to do the thing. And then once you learn how to do the thing, then you can start making the thing more challenging and actually challenging your cardiovascular system. All right. But until you actually learn the skill, then a lot of times, because we're so trying to just like, get the cardio workout, and also try to like juggle this skill, balance this skill, we end up sacrificing the health and function of our body in the process. So step number one is to choose activities that are much lower on the skill requirement, from a skill requirement standpoint. Things such as walking or walking faster and slower, a little bit of intervals, using a stationary bike, or even, a little bit of a jog. Those are lower skill activities versus using some kind of, again, kettlebell, jump rope, battling ropes, all the things I brought up earlier.
You're right, Charlie. And you can even think really close to like what you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And learning skills is not bad. It's just very hard to learn a skill and challenge your cardio system at the same time. So here's a couple examples. Charlie, you brought up jump ropes. That's a great example. Jump roping is actually a really difficult skill for a lot of people. It's pretty easy for me because I've always done it since I was a kid. So for me, I can use that really easily for cardio. Now, other people, they're not very good at jump roping. So when they do jump rope for cardio, they are more trying to master the skill to just get the cardio benefit than actually getting the cardio benefit. So in that case, it might be more effective to do a ropeless jump. So they have little devices that have like a simulation of a feeling of having a jump rope in your hand, or you can just hold nothing and do a jump rope. Another example of this, I'm just highlighting all the things I'm good at, by the way. Another example of this for me is swimming. Like I was a competitive swimmer for many, many, many years. And so if I wanted to go use swimming for cardio, it'd be really easy for me to jump in the pool and do a swimming workout. For other people that don't know how to swim, a swimming workout would be more about attaining the skill than actually getting the cardio benefit. But if you're like, hey, but I kind of want to get in the pool, like that's something cool. Well, great. Learn the skill of swimming, but in the meantime, you could do things like water jogging or use one of those floaty devices where you can get in the cardio aspect, right? Getting your heart rate up, challenging your cardiovascular system while keeping the skill level low. So I don't want you to listen to that and think like, oh, well, I shouldn't learn new skills. No, you should learn new skills. It's just that you have to separate new skills from when you're doing cardio, because cardio is generally kind of mindless, right? When you're doing cardio, you're not thinking, okay, use my delt, use my bicep, use my hand. You're thinking, just go. You can't be also trying to master a skill at the same time. At least the skill level relative to what you already have has to be kind of low. So we just want to make that differentiation.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up swimming, because a lot of people think, oh, well, I know how to swim. But, when people use swimming for their workouts or are there competitive swimmers, like there's a distinct difference from, from a skill level standpoint. And I would even throw running in there as well. Like people who are really good runners, they are very skilled at the activity of running. Like they're very good with that, and so often people's bodies will start to break down because their running form isn't particularly great, and so it doesn't make running a bad activity at all. In fact, we run and we recommend that, hey, if you can run, then please go for runs. It's a great activity, but understand that there is a skill level from a form perspective, a skill level requirement for that, and just simply by improving the skill, now all of a sudden it can become a more viable cardio activity. So that's step number one, or that's idea number one. Is kind of minimize the skill that is required for the activities that you're doing, and then that will allow you to more effectively challenge your cardiovascular system while minimizing the risk that's stressful to your joints.
All right, the next tip for minimizing stress when you do cardio is to use less range of motion. Now, this might be kind of weird because you're thinking, well, isn't running and isn't walking? How do I change my range of motion? Every single exercise you do, or most of them, you can change your range of motion. Things you can't change your range of motion on is like if you're doing box jumps and the box is 12 inches tall, you can't change that 12-inch box, but you could choose a different box, right?
That's true.
So think about your range of motion. So one of the riskiest places for your body is when you're doing large range of motion. And while using large range of motion is required for keeping range of motion, we talk about that all the time with strength training, using large range of motion when you're not being controlled and mindful is a huge red flag. And most of the time when you're doing cardio, you're not really thinking about control and being mindful. Again, you're probably listening to music. You're probably trying to pump yourself up. You're probably trying to be as mindless as possible, which is why we want to minimize the skill. But the second piece of that is we want to minimize range of motion. So I want to give you an example of this. I just had a woman that is my client, and she injured her hip. She went to the gym. She tried to do some stuff, and it was just too much. So anyways, we're working on getting her back to feeling great. And one thing she loves to do is walk. But she's like, when I walk, it bothers my hip now. And so the biggest thing that I had to teach her is how to walk with less range of motion so that she can still get in the cardio benefit without this giant range of motion. And her mind was blown. She was like, how do I even walk with less range of motion, right? It's a good question. So if you think about your stride length, if you can shorten that, then do that. And by the way, you can shorten it. So think about almost doing like quicker, smaller steps if you're going to apply this to walking. But that is one way to limit your range of motion, especially if you are already feeling like bothered by a certain joint, or you feel like a certain area is, or a certain exercise is bothersome. You can do this with running as well. You can do this with jumping jacks. You can do this with ladder drills, all different types of footwork cardio drills. We highlight this a lot in our cardio programs in our membership, but you can change like how large are you moving? Like one of our programs, Nothing But Cardio, is like a progressive one where we take one movement and we do it 3 different ways. And it shows you how easy you can take jumping jacks and make them less skillful or more skillful, or less range of motion or more range of motion. Because again, even when it comes to cardio, we always have to be matching our body so it is not injuring our body, because this thing has to be repeatable over and over and over again.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the walking example, because I think it's a little bit of a misunderstanding out there that, walking is not that stressful on the joints. It's low, it's considered low impact, and so therefore it's considered joint friendly. But from a range of motion perspective, especially if you are power walking or trying to walk really fast, you'll actually use a lot of the available range of motion in your hips. Not as much as sprinting, but for most people, it'll actually be more range of motion in their hips than if they were to try to jog. So sometimes if you're like, I'm trying to power walk, I'm trying to walk really fast, but it's just bothersome for my hips, a switch is actually to go, instead of power walking, is to go to jogging. And I know that can seem counterintuitive, because a lot of times jogging is seen as like the next level up, the more intense, but from a range of motion perspective, it can actually be less intense, using less range of motion than if you are trying to power walk somewhere really fast. So just kind of keeping that in mind as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing that you brought up that I really liked was the idea of using like an agility ladder or doing some footwork. Now, this does have a bit higher skill, or at least it can, but it's for most people going to keep their range of motion much smaller. So if you feel like, your coordination is there, and, you are good with, doing different footwork drills and stuff like that, maybe you have experience with dance, or you can pick up those moves a little bit more quickly. Or if you just feel like you're relatively, well coordinated from a movement perspective, not from a clothing perspective, then using something like an agility ladder, it may feel a little bit lower skill for you, but it will also, more importantly, keep your range of motion a little bit smaller, which will make it less stressful for your joints.
Awesome. Yeah. And another thing I love about the agility ladder, since we're on this topic, is that it does require some skill, like learning the drills, but also failing at that skill is not very much risk.
Yes.
Right? Like
yes.
Maybe you trip over the edge of the ladder, or maybe you tape your ladder on your floor, or maybe you're using your tiles on your floor as your agility ladder. So what's really great is like if you mess up, it's not like a huge risk, versus like if you're doing like a 2-foot box jump, and that's high skill, and then you miss that and you fall on your tailbone, and there we go.
Or you scar up your shins.
That's right. So anyways.
Not that either of us have done that ever.
Yeah. So skill level, keep it low, use less range of motion. And the last one, which is probably the biggest one, and it's the one I want you to focus on the most, is making sure you're resistance training 3 times a week. So what's really interesting, and we've talked about this a lot, is like we always talk about using your exercise, using your resistance training to live your life, right? To live the way you want to live, to be a great grandparent and be able to get up and down off the floor, or be able to lift things, or be independent, be strong, be functional, and also be healthy, right? So your lab work looks great, your strength is great, your bone health is great. But another thing that resistance training does is it's also like your insurance on being able to keep your cardio system healthy. Because Your cardio system is reliant on your muscles being able to move and contract over and over and over again. Think about walking. How many steps do you do? 2,000, 4,000, 10,000? That's a lot of over and over and over again. When you think about swimming, how many strokes with your arms do you do? 1 million? Yes. And how do you do that? You do that by using your muscles over and over and over again. But what are you doing to service your muscles to make sure that they can do that for you? Like a lot of times we talk to people and they're like, yeah, I just do cardio because it's easy and I like it. Well, great. Well, one day that's going to break down because we're humans. That's what happens to our body. When we overdo stuff or underdo stuff, right? You do nothing. Your muscles break down. They need the appropriate stimulus. And when we use resistance training, especially the way we teach it here in the Exercise for Life studio and on this page and in our membership, is that we are looking for how do we make resistance training build the health and function of your muscles so that it can translate into you doing your cardio. It can translate into you going on the trip and going for that hike. It can translate into all the things that you're wanting to do in your life because it all depends on muscles. And resistance training is the number one way, the most potent way to service your muscles. I think sometimes when things are like going wrong in our body or cardio isn't going well, we always never think about the muscles because we're using our muscles. Using and servicing are much different. Using and building, using and rebuilding are very different things. And we always look elsewhere, like, oh, what supplement am I missing? Or, oh, what nutrient in my diet am I missing? Well, the first thing we should always look at, I'm not saying those aren't missing, but the first thing that most people are missing is regular resistance training, which means regular service to your muscles of making sure that they are working properly.
Yeah, this is one of the most powerful aspects of doing resistance training, especially when you start to do it on a consistent basis. A lot of times we think the benefits of resistance training stop from an aesthetic standpoint, like being able to build muscle or tone up or whatever, as well as kind of improving our strength. And it can be very good for both of those, don't get me wrong, but being able to protect and support your joints, being able to improve the function of your muscles and like you're saying, kind of like maintain that muscle maintenance aspect so you can continue to do other activities where you're not being as mindful like every single second of it, such as most cardio activities. It will allow you to use your body in the ways that you want to use it and have those activities ultimately be less stressful for your joints because you're building in more margin to your system. You're building in more resilience to your system so you can go for your runs, you can do your bike rides, you can do your group classes and everything like that, and your body can tolerate doing those things better. In part because it has a higher baseline of strength, in part because you have just done enough stimulation for your muscles that they're like, okay, yeah, like we're functioning at a higher level now. And so that is one of the big things, the big pieces that resistance training on a regular basis brings to the board. And especially when you do it, like you're saying, Julie, how we describe in the Exercise for Life membership and on this podcast, where you are being super mindful, super focused on squeezing your muscles, making sure that everything is within your symptom-free range of motion, all the keys that we talk about, that will allow you to build the resiliency within your system, allow you to build that margin into your body so you can keep doing your cardio exercise, which, like we've been saying, has so many profound health benefits, from brain health to longevity, obviously cardiovascular health, disease prevention, glucose regulation, everything like that. But you'll be able to do so while minimizing the risk that it ends up stressing your joints and ultimately minimizing the risk that you have to stop doing your cardio because your joints are so achy and beat up.
So here's the thing. Your joints are controlled and supported all by muscles. So if you are currently like, hey, I do cardio and I don't do XYZ because like those bother my joints, that's a really good sign that you are not doing enough resistance training to keep your joints feeling supported enough relative to what you're doing or relative to the state of your joints. And if you're also like, well, hey, like I do some cardio, but like I can't do resistance training because, as you just said, my knees hurt, right? I have a knee problem. I have fasciitis. I have low back pain. It flares up. That is actually a really good like sign telling you that you are not doing enough resistance training. And if you're not sure how to approach this, you guys got to join our membership. This is what we talk about all the time, because even a few podcasts back, we talked about what signs does your body give you to tell you that it needs more resistance training.
And one of those, you're not doing enough exercise.
You're not doing enough exercise, right? And that is one of the biggest signs is pain. And ironically, or whatever, I don't know if this is ironic, but most people actually perceive that signal from our bodies as a reason to not exercise. And it's a terrible reason to not exercise, because exercise is probably one of the most potent things you can do to actually start to support your joints and to heal your joints and to help your joints function better and be stronger. Because I think that's what we all want in our life, is like, hey, my body works when I want it to work. It's relatively easy to use. And a lot of times that starts slipping away, especially when we're doing nothing about it, or we're doing like a biased exercise plan, meaning like all cardio, no resistance training. And resistance training is really what restores all that. But you have to know how to do it, right? So like that it's building your body, it's not breaking your body down more. But that's why we're so passionate about our membership. So.
Exactly. Well, and one thing that was brought up during that episode is, even if you feel like, you look at your schedule and like, well, I'm lifting weights 4 times a week, how you're doing it may actually not be designed to improve the health and function of your body, to improve the health and function of your muscles. And so because of that, like, you may be doing a lot of activity and you say, okay, well, I'm working out a lot, but how you are doing it, you're not getting enough of the type of exercise that we're recommending. Yes, you're going to the gym, maybe you're using the machines, you're using the free weights or whatever, and you say, okay, well, I'm checking off my lifting weights, my resistance training, but how you are doing it is not conducive to improving the long-term health and function of your body. So that's a big key as well. Even if you feel like, okay, well, I'm getting it done, but my joints are still aching and I'm still not able to do my cardio, how you're doing resistance training, that's really the big key. And that's the differentiator of how we recommend, how most people exercise, and how we teach you to exercise in the Exercise for Life membership. So if you're interested in learning more about how to do your cardio in ways that are not stressful for your joints, we do have a couple of programs within the Exercise for Life membership that you'll really love. Okay, the first is called Nothing But Cardio, and as the name would apply, it's nothing but cardio. But with that, like, we walk you through a progression of a whole bunch of different cardio exercises, so you can have a wide variety of ways that you can get your cardio in that ultimately are not that stressful to your joints, and then we give you kind of the supporting pieces for that as well. And then the other program is called the Core and Cardio program. It's a lot of core exercises, but then combined with a lot of cardio. So we've received a ton of great feedback on both of those programs. Those are two of the more favorite programs within the membership that we hear from so many members. So we definitely want to invite you to check those out. And then we have a ton of resistance training programs in there as well that will help get that resistance training piece dialed in for you in the way that we describe. So if you want to join the Exercise for Life membership and get in on all those programs, all you have to do is go to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com/membership. You can choose which option works best for you, whether it's a monthly option or the premium option. But both will include not only the Nothing But Cardio, the Core and Cardio, and the resistance training programs as well. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that's trying to get their cardio in, that's trying to do their aerobic exercise on a regular basis, but it's really bugging their joints? Share this episode with them so they can understand the different things that they can do within their workouts to make sure they can keep getting their cardio in without stressing out their joints. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.